Hello and welcome to another edition of Wise Counsel Weekly. I'm your host, Tanyan Farley, and I have my co-host with me, Alex. Alex, how you doing this morning, my friend?
Oh, well, man. How about you? How was that trip?
It was a good weekend. Definitely nice to get away. It was the first time I've been on an airplane since March 14th, which for
Wow.
me is a very
Yeah,
long time.
that's a long time, man.
Yeah, it's the least I've traveled, definitely in the last 8 years. So that's pretty. It was different for sure. It was different for sure, and seeing everyone on the plane with a mask. If you haven't been on an airplane, anyone that's listening in a while, make sure you bring your mask. Protect the people around you. The mask is not for you, right? It's for the folks on the plane that may be a little more vulnerable than you are. So that was
Absolutely.
definitely an interesting experience.
Yeah, not bad at all, man. So what we got on the docket for today?
So actually, that little piece we talked about right there actually intros really well into our topic of the day, which is resiliency, right? And how to build it, what resiliency is, and really how you can cultivate it in your personal and professional life. So we have that as our main topic today. We have a big guest today. Our guest is Brian Michael Cooper. He is the president of the Houston Roughnecks in the XFL. He's a Columbia Law grad. He's got a Harvard degree as well. The guy has done many things and has a lot of insight that I think will bring to the table as both an attorney and working as a leader in sports and more specifically now in a league that was very successful up until the coronavirus pandemic. So I think it'll be really
Right.
interesting to hear from him on not only his life but on resiliency. And then we'll segue into our quick hits with Bobby Dixon, get his perspective, and then our big three for today is people that we think of when the word resiliency is mentioned, right? So really we tried to stick to modern times. Alex and I
Mhm.
joked that you could go back as far as you want on this on someone, but we tried to stick with people that are kind of more modern, but people that we think of when we think of resiliency.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's head into game time, man. So today the topic is resilience, man. So what comes to mind when you think of the word resilience to you, Tanya?
So I actually went and looked up the definition of resilience because in my mind, I have this vision of almost like a riot shield in front of you, right? That you can take
Okay.
things off of it and keep going forward. So the definition of resilience is actually the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties or, toughness is really
Mhm.
what they had written down. So for me, I think about someone that is tough, not only physically, but mentally. And then professionally, obviously a business that can, take hits and keep moving forward is really what I
Right.
think of. So, we'll dive into the different kind of pieces of resiliency here in a minute. But what do you think of when the word resiliency is mentioned?
I mean, for me, man, resilience is just not quitting. Even against all odds, I'm going to keep standing. Just like your immune system is probably the most resilient thing I could think of, because no matter what or what gets inside of you, what infections are inflicting you at the moment, your immune system just won't let you die. It wants you to keep living. And that's what resilience is in real life. I mean, we want you to keep going, want you to keep thriving, even in the business world. You want to keep that business alive. You want to keep moving it to new heights. And regardless of what adversities come your way, you want to move through those and break through those brick walls to make sure that you're achieving the goals that you want to achieve. I mean, honestly, resilience requires courage, and courage is really
Yep.
developed in dire situations. Those situations are what brings out the best in us. It's not about what the situation is; it's how you respond to those situations when that adversity hits, and that determines your growth. And that's when you see the resilience in someone, and that's when you see that greatness in that person.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, from a personal perspective, right? I think there's a couple of things that I think of when I think of resilience, right? I think of
Mhm.
psychological resilience, emotional resilience, physical resilience, and then the last one is community resilience, right? So you hit on a couple of those, which, really I think apply to the personal level, which is psychologically, like how can I move forward from, how can I move through this, adversity that's in front of me? So I thought about it a little bit from a personal perspective what you can do, right? So the first thing that I think about is you can face your fears and change the narrative. So for most of us, the fear of what's happening is much greater than what's actually happening, right? We talked about this a few episodes back where we talked about 91% of the fears that people had about the pandemic didn't come to pass. So you think about if you can confront those fears a little at a time and find a way to move forward and change the narrative with yourself so that you are more confident in yourself. I think that's really important. I also think that understanding that you need to take some self-compassion is important as well. I think that we're all going to suffer losses. We're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to fall down. I think understanding that you're not the only one that's going through that and forming that in your mind, I think is really
Right.
important, because then you can understand kind of how to move forward and how to grow yourself in that capacity. And then really from a business perspective, I've thought about this a lot the last couple months, is how do we make a resilient business?
Mhm.
And I think that, Brian will comment on that today when it comes to his experience, and Bobby will as well. But my kind of 2 cents there is there's really a couple elements. And I think the first one is being as efficient as possible in your workplace at all times, so that you have, efficient processes, number one, but you have ample cash, you have ample support resources, and you have processes in place that will work, whether they're remote or whether they're in person. So I think focusing on that stuff when times are good is really important, because obviously, when times are good, it's really easy to use that kind of cash or to use that kind of manpower and other sources when
Mhm.
you could be focusing on building a resilient business.
Right.
The second piece, which I think we've seen during not only the COVID pandemic, but during, the social justice kind of movement that's sweeping the country right now, is that building and investing in your community is incredibly important, because when times are tough, your community is going to be a key piece of making you resilient, right? I think about small businesses that started with, maybe the owner was doing, the example I think of right now is, the fitness studios that have been really hit hard by the pandemic. Most
Mhm.
of those are franchise owned, right? So you have an owner that is teaching the classes, doing the books, all that stuff, but they've built a community within that fitness center where those people love that person, they respect that person, they want that business to succeed. So because of that, when those businesses went online, guess what? Those people were buying into it. They were supporting them
Mhm.
through that. They were saying, hey, let's buy from local businesses. So I think, the two key points that I can think of from a business perspective is really, when times are good, make sure you focus on being efficient and finding ways to keep your business ready for, anything that comes up. And then number two is, invest in your community. What are your thoughts on that?
Man, that's spot on. I mean, those tactics are what you need to build your business and continue to fight through adversity at different times. I mean, honestly, struggle is the classroom of growth. So you don't know, how great you are until you have to go through something like that. And especially with your legacy in hand, with that business and that name brand, you want to leave a lasting memory in people's minds of how you fight through a situation, how you come back after a COVID pandemic, how you come back after the community's kind of been burned down, so to say. Your legacy is determined by how many times you get back up after being knocked down. Uh,
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And I think that that's actually a perfect transition into our guest, Brian Michael Cooper today, who has, worked in several industries, is a attorney. And like I said, most recently was the president of the Houston Roughnecks in the XFL. So we're going to bring him on now to discuss, a little about his life and how to be resilient in your professional and personal life. All right, we now welcome on Brian Cooper, former assistant AD at Rice University, former president and GM of the Rio Grande Vipers of the G League, current attorney, and president of the Houston Roughnecks of the XFL Football League. So, Brian, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Good to be here.
Awesome, man. We're happy to have you on. As I kind of just ran through there, Brian has done a number of things on top of being, an attorney that has degrees from Cornell, Harvard, and Columbia. So that's quite the list there. So we wanted to make sure we shared that with the group. And really, with Brian, we wanted to talk to him a little about his background, how he's kind of reached this point, and on the topic of resiliency today that we've covered, with Bobby Dixon and in our intro here, just how you continue to take things that happen in your life, whether good or bad, whether in your control or not in your control, and continue to move forward. So Brian, why don't you just give us a little bit on your background and kind of what you're doing now?
Appreciate it. Thank you. And thanks for having me here. So yeah, I mean, I was born and raised in Indiana, Evansville, Indiana. Left the home at 17 to go to Cornell University. I played 2 years of football there. I will put those in air quotes because I was so good as quarterback when I got there that they moved me immediately to tailback. And so at that point, it was a downhill. You talk about resiliency right there. It was already downhill right there.
Right,
so,
right.
I knew at some point I kind of had the talk that the coaches give you, like, look, you might want to hit those books. And so I did that, but sports was always the love of my life. And so I went on to graduate school into law school, interned for the NFL in the management council office with them, and then went to Proskauer Rose and just started my career as a sports attorney from there. Practiced in New York and then in Houston, and then ultimately ended up at the Vipers, and then from then on kind of moved into the executive side. And so sports has always been a great part of my life, from college to law school to practicing as a lawyer. I represented, I think, just about every league except for Major League Baseball at this point.
Well, they could use your help from what it looks like.
And worked with some great players as an agent. I did that for about 10 years as well, both basketball and football players, and I enjoyed that a lot. Got to meet some really great guys. Obviously, I did time at Rice, and then also spent time at Dish Network as the director of sports programming there, and got to do some great things up there. And then ultimately went back into the practice, and then got the opportunity to lead the Roughnecks came along, and it was a dream job. I get to run a pro football team in my favorite city of Houston. Couldn't beat it. And
awesome.
We were 5-0. We're getting ready to win that.
That's right.
And then coronavirus hit, and everything kind of went downhill from there, unfortunately. But it was a wonderful time. I loved that time with the Roughnecks. I think we did a lot of great things, and I think the league did a lot of great things as well. And we'll
I
see
agree.
what happens with them going forward, but right now, it's a little bit up in the air as to what's going to happen. But keeping an eye on everything there and seeing if it has a resolution at some point.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, I think people completely understand that. The thing that I want to make sure everyone that is listening understands is I've watched football since I can remember, right? And it's been a huge part of my life. And I can say that the success of the XFL this year was the most incredible thing I've seen in comparison to the NFL in my entire life. And I also want to specify, and I know that not all of our listener base is in Houston, but we have, all the major sports here, and the fans for all of those are very crazy about it. And I can tell you this spring, Roughneck fever completely took over Houston.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
people were everywhere in jerseys. People were all in. I mean, it was the most exciting team to watch in the league. So,
Yeah.
Brian, kudos to you for what you guys pulled together there. I think, regardless of what happens forward with the XFL, I think that you've proven your ability to lead a team and lead a successful team in a big city. So I think that was really cool to watch.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Well, yeah, and it definitely was a team effort. Look, June and the coaches on their side just did an incredible job. June really was he's the father of the run and shoot with Mouse Davis, and they ran that thing to perfection in the XFL. And you get a quarterback like PJ Walker, and then on the business side, we had some great people working for us. And the funny thing is, all of that was when I joined the team, we didn't have a name. We were XFL Houston, and building that staff from literally one person to 30, over a year. It really is. It's really interesting to see it develop, and then when you take the field, you're like, wow, I can't believe 8 months ago we were a thought, right? And now all of a sudden we're actually taking the field with helmets and uniforms and then winning, and with we had 18,000 fans, averaged 18,000, had 20,000 at our last game. We were going to 25 at our next. It was special. And the city of Houston was just, it just elected. I just love the fans, love the city. I will fight anyone that says that this is not the best sports city in the country.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right. Just for reminiscing on my days prior to working with Aden Consulting Group at a sports retailer in town, and a lot of my former coworkers there were letting me know just how many requests they were getting for Roughneck apparel and Roughneck jerseys. So I definitely understand the sports fever that was hitting at the time. Just let me know, how was it, running a professional football team? Was it what you expected? Was it a little bit different? Because I know you've been with the Rio Grande and also been with the Rice University. So how was it running a pro football team?
It was, a little bit different, definitely a larger market than we had in RGV, but similar circumstances. I got to RGV. We were, the team was in its second year, so we didn't have to build everything, but there's a lot of stuff that we had to build for that team down in the valley. And one of the things down there was trying to just, and with the Roughnecks was the parallel of building the brand, right? Building that brand recognition and getting people to see, what the team was about. We did that through the Rockets with the Vipers. We developed a relationship with the Rockets, did the first hybrid deal with them. With the Roughnecks, we had, it was a little bit different because literally, we're starting from absolute scratch. I mean, I'm the first, on the business side, I was the first hire. June was the first hire. He had to build his coaching staff. I'm building our staff, and we didn't even get fully staffed up until around Christmas. Wow. So we were, in addition to, I've heard some people say, well, we were building the plane while we were flying it. And that's really sort of what was happening, right? We were kicking off in February. That was going to happen. Right. So we had to kind of hit all those benchmarks, getting tickets on sale, getting things in place for all the things that were going to happen for game day. All that stuff was going to happen. So as people were coming on board, it was definitely a shorter time period to get ramped up. And that was a little exciting, but a little nerve-wracking as well, because it was, like I said, there was no, we were kicking off on February 8th, so there was no excuses to say, well, we need to move it back a week because we're not ready. It was like, you're going to be ready, and so we just had to get and we had a lot of great staffers who came in and said, yeah, let's get this done, and we did, and so that was the biggest thing. I think the difference there between that and maybe the Vipers was that the shorter time frame and the fact that we had to build so much going forward.
Right. Yeah, no, that sounds like, we've talked on this podcast a lot about having a date on the calendar and the importance of a date on a calendar, and what that means to your accountability and your ability to track towards your goals. So I think that's a great point. And the fact that, this is kicking off on February 8th, whether we want it to or not, right? And we're going to make it happen. So I think that's really incredible to hear, and kind of how it built up to it. So can you talk a little bit about, how because you'd mentioned it, you had to build a brand, a way of operations, and a football team. Can you talk a little bit about that process? Obviously, I know there's a lot of work that went into it, but being kind of your second or third go around of building a brand, because I think really at Rice, you focused a lot on that too. Like what did you take from those situations to roll into this one to kind of build that out?
Yeah, I think, my core component with all of this is connecting. I love sports because I like connecting with fans. Plain and simple. I like connecting with people. The fan experience is critical. And I think for us, we had to really do the hard work and rolling up the sleeves of getting the grassroots marketing together. And I know a lot of people sometimes say, well, we've gotten through new technology and data analytics, and we can pinpoint who really likes it. Here's our core audience group. Let's go after them. But a lot of it is just kind of getting out there and meeting people and making sure they understand that there's a connection, because I think that they got to know you care, right? If you don't show that you care, they're not going to really follow you. And showing that you care means getting out and really meeting folks. So what we did, and we did it in RGV and we did it in Houston, which was we got out for fan events. We got, at the first couple fan events, we had like maybe 20 people. Then we had 30, then we had 40. And we started getting, and I told my staff, I said, look, it's going to be slow at the beginning. People don't know us. So we may have 10 people show up at an event, right? You don't know who we are. And then over time, you continue to build that brand, and we continue to kind of build those stair-step processes to continue to connect with the fans. One of the things we also, really, I really drilled into, our staff was customer service and customer feedback, always getting back to somebody very quickly. And I think we developed a reputation pretty quickly that, hey, we're going to respond when you have a concern. I would get emails from fans, and I would, but I worked 18, 19 hours a day. And right. Around 8 or 9 o'clock, I'd go and start looking at email. And we had a general info email account. And, you get the person, well, I didn't, I was at the game and the beer line was long or whatever. And I'd write back. I'd say, hey, I'm sorry about that. And, it's a little, surprising, right, to get
the president of the team emailing you back.
And I was like, but that's the things you got to do. It's the little things like that you have to do. And it takes a lot of time. I always love it when you hear people talk about, I came in on to build that kind of brand, particularly in sports, you got to do the little things and do them consistently. And over time, you'll get that connection. And we still have work to do, but I'm very proud of what our staff did. And we brought in people who had that mentality. I wanted people on our staff who understood that this was not going to be, if you came in thinking that this was going to be something that was going to happen overnight,
Right.
you were going to be really disappointed. And you were going to be disheartened quickly. And I tell people this all the time in sports. We're on the front office side. We aren't we're not I say the duck on the water a lot. If people will hear me say that repeatedly.
Yep.
We are underneath. We're the legs turning. Nobody sees us. The duck is moving smoothly across. That's the football team. That's the game you see on Saturday or Sunday.
Right.
The front office is behind the scenes. And if you're not willing to be that individual, it's very difficult to, I think, have a career in sports, because it's a long hours and not a lot of recognition. And
Right.
it's got some special people who really love what they're doing to do it. And we have some good people doing that.
Absolutely. And just hearing you talk about the people that you guys hire and bring on, it kind of takes me back to one of my internships. I literally interned the inaugural year for the Chicago Eater.
Yep.
Oh, with the Skeeters.
Everyone
Alex?
in there had to do everyone else's job and make sure that the boat was still afloat.
Yeah.
But that just speaks to the topic of today of resiliency. And I just wanted to ask, like, with you being with the Rio Grande, building up that team and building up the Roughnecks as well, it's somewhat of an underdog story if you think about it, building that up from the beginning.
Yeah.
Did you have that chip on your shoulder every day when you came into that building just to keep that going?
Every day. I mentioned a story. We had an individual talk to us right maybe after our third home game, right? And we were just, look, we at this point we were average, we had 18, and 20, and then we were going to have 25. Then somebody say to us, he goes, yeah, I don't know, it's Roughnecks, what are you guys thinking? Probably 2,000, 2,500, fans a game. And I was like, I said, right now, I go, if you put us in the NBA, we'd be 13th in overall average attendance. We had, we had over 18,000 in average attendance. And I said, and I think that chip is always there, right? And it's actually a good motivator, right? It's like, it's fine. You don't necessarily, you don't think, we can do this, then we'll demonstrate it and get it done. And I remember with the Vipers, my first league meeting, we were dead last in every metric. And, there's nothing like going to a league meeting where you're sitting there and you're like, they're running out of everything. And I mean, we're just on every economic metric, like we were just, the bottom. And you're sitting there and you're thinking, okay, we got some work to do. But yeah, you have that chip and that underdog mentality to say, hey, look, you know what? We're going to be okay. We're going to roll up our sleeves and get it done. And certainly in the XFL, I think as well, I think until people really understood what we could do and came to a game and saw how it was and saw how professional it was and saw the atmosphere, it took some time to win over folks. But that chip never really goes away. I think, you want it to kind of, it's always, even I remember, we were watching The Last Dance when Michael Jordan was manufacturing chips, right?
Yeah.
Well, he was finding one to put on his shoulder, man.
Right? Things that might not necessarily even have happened, So I think it's always good to have that motivator, to kind of get you going. And we had enough motivation as well. We needed to make sure we got our name out there, and people wanted to see who we are. And so we had to get that done. And I don't think I want to stress, it's not in a bad way to have that underdog mentality, right? I think it keeps you focused, quite frankly. I think you can get complacent if you don't, and I think it's always kind of good to say, hey, look, don't read the press. Don't read your own press. People always have said that, because, quite frankly, there's more work that has to be done.
Yeah, no, I think those are all dead on. I think you hit on a couple really key points that we talked about earlier in the podcast as far as what can a business do to build resiliency, focus on the community, manage expectations, and then when all, craziness breaks loose, lean on your values because that's what's going to guide you. You just mentioned from a personal perspective, really what you can do to kind of build resiliency, put that chip on your shoulder, carry on, continue to move forward. So how do you, as someone who is a Columbia law grad, has a Harvard degree, has a Cornell degree, has worked and led in all these major organizations, continue to have that underdog mentality, continue to build resiliency each and every time? I mean, I know not everyone knows all of your background, but guys, I can safely say that each one of his positions he's taken is a stair step up the ladder. And I think we're looking pretty soon at, hopefully, whatever your next endeavor is. Baseball sounds like it needs your help, but whatever the next thing is, how do you continue to build that resiliency and continue to stay fiery and grow, knowing your pedigree and background?
I think it's kind of keeping that, it's keeping being grounded, right? And sports can do that to you, right? Sports is the great equalizer, right? It's like when you're up 28-3 in a Super Bowl in the fourth quarter, and I won't name names, Atlanta Falcons, but I mean, sports keeps you from getting complacent, I think, and that's same true in business. I think that you have to always be looking to grow and learn. And one of the things I've been trying to do, and I'm not really great at it, which is I want to always try to advance and find something different. There's always something that I can see or learn and that I want to to do. And I think once you do that, that kind of keeps that motivation going. I think many of you were talking about many of the things that I've done in my career. A lot of them also were strategically done so that I could build another skill set. I talk to people about this all the time. About where do you want to be in 5 or 10 years? And I said, generally, look, and this is not, I did not do this the proper way, which was kind of look at yourself and say, okay, I need these skill sets. So we'll go out and get them. Okay, this job's going to help me do this. This job's going to help me do this. And I think that allows you to do it as well. And so I think I stay motivated partly because I think there's just so much. I think if you get to a point where you're like, I'm fully formed and I got everything I can do, then that's a red flag, because I think there's always, I'm hoping that I'm continuing to learn, throughout my life. I think I want to, if I'm not doing that, I think that to me, I think that I'm kind of wasting a little bit of time that I'm here. We're not, I don't want to get super existential here, but I don't think we're not here for a surprisingly long period of time. And I think if we're not trying to advance and grow, and I mean, even if it's learning a new language or, or an instrument or something, I mean, I just think that there's always going to be room to do that. And so even in business and in life, I kind of always felt like, okay, I need, I'd like to, get this skill set, and let's see if I can't make this work too.
Gotcha. That makes perfect sense. I hate the stagnant feeling of a job or a certain training or something like that. Stuck.
Yeah, I completely agree, Alex. You're cutting out a little bit. But yeah, go ahead. Keep going.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries.
Brian, just mentioning that you have being an avid runner that has completed a New York City marathon and 2 Houston half marathons. From that alone, they can just tell that you're a resilient person, that, when that wall comes up and you got to fight through it to finish through with that marathon. But also sometimes you have, weather delays or maybe it's freezing cold that day and you still got to fight through it to finish those races. Some things are just out of your control, So how, in the business sense, do you, despite what's going on in the occurrences that are out of your control in the business world, how do you continue to move forward in that aspect as well?
No, it's a great question. And I think what I do is the key is versatility. To me, I will always preach that you have a plan A and then you have a plan B, C, D, E, and so on. And with the Roughnecks in particular, that was one key core point of how we built our staff. I wanted to make sure they understood fully, like, look, this is a startup endeavor. There are going to be U-turns and shifts in the road. Are you capable of managing the unknown? And that means you got to be versatile. You got to have, if you are stuck to, and kind of have the blinders on, okay, this is the plan I've got, and I'm going to make it work no matter what. And people will do that. They'll like, I'm going to fit this square peg into the circle hole. I think when you have, 3 or 4 backup alternative paths, then you can say, okay, look, this hit us, we didn't see it coming, let's go this way. This hit us, we didn't see it coming, let's move this way. And so it's very important for me to have people on our staff who are versatile, who knew that they could, they could roll with it and roll with the punches. And I think that's how, you continue to kind of be, resilient, how you can, kind of manage the unexpected, right? There's always, I think the most consistent thing is that there are going to be some things that just happen that are out of your control.
Yep.
Coronavirus, right? I mean, this is a prime case in point of COVID-19, right? Mm-hmm. Where you try to fall back on other alternative paths and look back and say, okay, look, we've been faced with a challenge, all right, how do we overcome that challenge? And there's never a bad idea. This is the other thing, hopefully I can stress to folks. I'm always concerned when individuals don't allow for the free, and I hope that, I hope in life that I have been, hopefully my staff would agree with me, but I hope that I've been one who has really championed having open discussion and saying, look, I want to hear all ideas. The one thing that always was my pet peeve with my staff, and I've told them this, I said, look, the one thing that will drive me nuts is if you don't raise an idea and then we do something, we go down the wrong path, and then you come back and say, oh yeah, this is the idea I had. I'm like, just save it, but it's kind of having that versatility and that brainstorming. I think that helps you weather things that, again, there's going to be things that you just can't predict, but having enough, alternatives in place and taking all ideas into place, you can only get better that way. It's a learning process for everybody as well.
No, we completely agree. I mean, I think rolling with the punches, continuing to grow. The other thing you mentioned is continuing to learn. And we had a guest on a few weeks back, and we talked about how, Warren Buffett still reads, 4 hours a day, every day to learn something. So if we're not doing that, right, that's a knock on us, because he's, one of the most successful men of our time. So I think that's really key. So I know we're kind of running a little short on time here. I just got one last question for you. So now that, we're kind of at where we're at in time and we're moving forward, what are you doing now to grow your skill set, to better yourself, to get ready for whatever that next opportunity is? Because I think a lot of people listening are thinking, well, he's done a lot of things. He continues to learn from everything he's doing. What are you doing right now to manufacture that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm continuing. Look, I'm trying to learn and build on language skills, for example. As it looks like I'm going to head back into sports practice of law, and so I'm kind of getting used to learning what's happening, particularly on the transactional side with respect to with legal transactions. And so I'm kind of getting myself back up to speed with respect to how those deals are going to get done and how we can do things a little bit more efficiently as well. Are there things that we can do to advance kind of the practice so that it works a little bit better? We're in a different world now. Yeah. The other thing I'm doing is kind of to that end, segueing into that, we're managing what's happening different in both the legal and sports industries now with respect to COVID-19. It's different. It's going to be a different world now. You've got spectator sports, at least in the immediate future, for example, probably not coming back to where they were pre-COVID, obviously. What does that mean for all the ancillary people who are working within those industries, both hospitality or custodial or concessions? All those things are, you got to look at those industries as well. And so trying to get a better sense of kind of where everybody is in this kind of post-COVID or current and then potentially post-COVID-19 world. So there's a lot of learning to do right now. I'm always concerned when people kind of get on and say, well, we're able to do this, this, and this. And I was like, we haven't even, that's a little early to make a very specified decision, kind of going back to what I said before about having those alternate paths. So I think that's right now, that's what I'm doing, is trying to learn as much about how we can manage these industries in what will be probably a new normal going forward.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. Well, listen, Brian, thank you so much for coming on today. We really appreciate your insight. I think your, stories and not only, your mentality, but kind of how you wrap those together to continue to better yourself and gave some practical tips on how folks can do that as well, I think will be great for our listeners. So we appreciate it, man. We look forward to having you on, hopefully in October, November, when you got, something else great going. So we're looking forward to it, man.
I appreciate it. No, I'm glad to be on and glad to have the discussion. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Awesome. Thanks, Brian. So now we'll hear from some quick hits from our managing partner, Bobby Dixon. How you doing today, Bobby?
I'm doing well, guys. How are you guys this afternoon?
Not bad, not bad. So throughout COVID-19 pandemic, there's been a lot of talk about resilient businesses. And what does that term mean to you? And how can a business owner mold his business to be resilient?
Sure. Well, I think resiliency to me, simply in the simplest terms means, just the ability to withstand the pressures that come with changing seasons and changing climates and all those sorts of things, right? To have a longevity, about yourself as cycles and seasons change. So, with that meaning in mind, I think about, the model that best depicts resiliency for business is probably, Michael Porter's 5 forces model, right? When you think about it, you have a company in the middle. You have 5 forces, be it, market competition, pricing, what have you, right? That are surrounding and applying pressure at all times, right? And so it's not the absence of pressure, from those 5 forces. And I encourage anybody who's not familiar with those things to look up Michael Porter's 5 forces. But it's not the absence of pressure applied, right? It is the ability to best position yourself to withstand those pressures, right? And emerge kind of with a competitive victory. So, in answering your question and kind of applying that model, I think it's the companies who can put in practice the concepts like being nimble, agile, lean, all these things that have become buzzwords, in our business economy, right? We've got uncertainty, right? We've got accelerated pace of change. We've got, change coming at paces that's 10 years ahead of schedule. Right. And so again, it's not that change was never going to come. It's just that it's come so quickly. So I think the resilient businesses are those that are not going to fight the change. They're going to embrace it. They're going to try to, in a sustainable way, position themselves to best withstand it and hopefully emerge, right, with some provocative models and concepts.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And actually, that aligns a lot with the conversation we had earlier with each other and with Brian Cooper as well, talking about, how to remain resilient as a business and what to focus on. So to kind of shift gears, but stay on the same topic here, in a more personal sense, what do you think makes a resilient person? Is it a similar makeup to what makes a business resilient, right? Staying agile, staying nimble, or do you think there's some nuances from a personal level that helps you stay resilient through, issues you face?
That's a good question. I would say, certainly there's similarities, right? And we've got pressures, not necessarily market pressures, but life pressures, right? That sure as we live, are going to come, right? And so I think, rather than business models and processes, right, we've got ethos, right? And things that we subscribe to and internal compasses that tell us, hey, no matter what the season is, no matter what the cycle is, right? These are some things I'm going to hold fast to, right? To kind of, get me through and over, these obstacles. And these are things that I'm going to have to make adjustments, right, as change comes. And so it's kind of wisdom, I guess, is the vehicle that helps you understand and discern the difference between, when you need to stand firm and adjust. So I think there's some similarities. But with people, I think we're more akin to other creatures, right, of nature. I look at, things like turtles, right? On one account, they are the slowest animal, known to man. You watch them move and it's almost painful to watch, right?
Yep.
But life expectancy, right? And so you kind of go back and you say, hey, man, life's not a sprint, it's a marathon, right? And slow and steady often wins. And so you take that same turtle, he's got that shell, right? And he's got a sense, to know when to kind of curl back up in that shell. You take a lizard, for instance, right? When we have them running around here in Houston all the time, right? Those lizards have adaptability that when you grab them, the tail just kind of, pops right off. They keep moving. And so I think humans, have to kind of function, somewhat like these businesses we talk about. But then also, like creatures in their habitats, and that, hey man, there's some survival instincts that we were all born with, and the wisest among us kind of figure them out, right, and put them into practice.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense. I think those are very practical examples for people that can understand, the visual example of how that ties together. But I think that makes a lot of sense when it plugs into resiliency.
Yeah, absolutely. And you bringing up the idea of the turtle, this fits right into what our big three was today. Our topic was people that we think of in relation to resiliency. So does anybody come to mind when you think of the example of resiliency in their life, whether it's somebody famous or somebody you look up to that you can think of off the top of your head?
Uh, I mean, so many. Um, so many. I'm just trying to think, offhand. Now, do I have to pick somebody famous?
No.
Doesn't have to be.
No.
It's whatever comes to you. I mean, when Alex and I both wrote down ideas, and the folks will hear it in the big three at the end of the podcast, but we originally started with of all time, and there were so many choices that it was impossible to get down to three. So we just did of the modern times. But I mean, doesn't have to be someone famous. It could definitely be someone in your life.
Yeah,
So
somebody you just
I will
looked up
go with
to.
something that's kind of near and dear to me, and I'm gonna go with my father. And the reason I say that is because born in kind of backwoods of East Texas and Marshall, reared in city housing projects in Dallas, Texas, right? Brokenness all around him, but he had a resolve to set kind of another course, for his legacy and for his family. And, so with that in mind, it was sort of first to graduate high school, first to go to college, right? And staying focused with riffraff and all sorts of things all around him, right? And so I say resilient because as he kind of described to me, growing up, the things he had to walk past every day, right? And stay focused on the task at hand, and then also talks to me about people sort of in the same environment that went wayside that couldn't make it past all those obstacles and distractions, right, in their way every day, right? So you had to be kind of resilient. Found himself in college, right, in the 60s. I know we're in a climate of social change and a lot of things going on, but in college, actually high school senior year saw the assassination of JFK. In college saw the assassination of Martin Luther King, right, and all those sorts of things, and so kind of had to come through formative years, in tumultuous climates, right, and had to be resilient, right, and come out, with a resolve. And wrapping up a long story. On one hand, was able to kind of, I said my dad's kind of a person of ones, right? And he had one job, one wife, one barber that he still goes to. He still goes to the same barber that he went to in college. Yeah, I think he's just a couple years older than him. And so when I was using that example of sort of core values, right? He's kind of exercised these core values, but I brought up those other examples to say, while holding the core values, had to adapt, right, to things that have changed. I'm talking about the 60s, now talking about 2020, right? So how do you be consistent and congruent, but still adapt, some 60 years later, right? So anyway, that's kind of an example that I can speak to directly. Don't know if it fully answers the question, but he's certainly a resilient man with a lot of resolve for me.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. I think for the people out there, I think a lot of people would, hopefully look to their parents and say the same, and hope to people look to their people in their lives, to be the same. So I think that's great. I think that, if you can see that in your parents, and, I know that you do the same with your kids, and we're looking to do that with our future children and people around us. So I think it's a great way to put it. So Bobby, thank you for coming on. Thank you for the insight as always. And we look forward to talking to you next week.
Appreciate it, guys.
Let's head into the cool down. So Tanyan, what are you reading, listening to right now to help you with, productivity or your own personal growth?
So this week I have been listening to a podcast called How I Built This on NPR radio. Really, it focuses on entrepreneurs talking about their stories of how they started their company, what they faced in adversity, really tips and tricks to get through some of that. And I think that really has been helping me with understanding how to navigate things as a small to medium-sized business, as well as getting through, some of the tough times that are impacting us externally right now. I also have been reading a bunch of articles off the website inc.com. There's just a lot on there as far as things that help you professionally and personally with your development. So those have been the things I've been focusing on this week. How about you?
Nice. I bought a book on Amazon about a week back. I saw it on Twitter. It's called 100 Amazing Facts About the Negro. Literally got it off Amazon for like $5. And it's just interesting, the more and more you learn about inventions that African Americans have made, that we use every single day. And it kind of ties just into our game time topic of just resilience, regardless of the situations that we're facing in America. A lot of people in the African American community have just overcome those and just have led full, meaningful lives. And also just to show you, it's so much history from all cultures that's just out there hidden in books. And
For
it's
sure.
exciting to read through and find them sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. If you look back at history, right, history is written by the victors oftentimes. So it's interesting to see, stuff that may have come from, oppressed groups or from groups that, may not have had as much power at the time. So I think that's really interesting to read stuff like that. So I completely agree.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm just getting started on it. So let's jump into the big three, baby. Some people in history that have been resilient and some of that come to mind when we think of the relationship. So what's your, wait. Let's see, you got any honorable mentions this week before we jump into the big three?
Okay. So like I said, I wanted to keep this kind of recent because I think we could go back. I think the obvious choice here for the all-time resilient person is Jesus, but we're going to keep it modern here. So my honorable mention is Josh Hamilton, who played outfielder for the Texas Rangers, dealt with, drug addiction, dealt with a bunch of other stuff, and, found ways to become resilient, to make it back to Major League Baseball and to become an MVP. So I think that is, the definition of resilience and being able to bounce back. How about you?
That's a solid one. So my honorable mention, these guys ended up being NBA champions, but the way their stories all started off are really, 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 they could have stopped playing basketball as soon as they faced these adversities. Because Michael Jordan, cut from his high school team, didn't even make the varsity.
Yep.
Scottie Pippen was a team manager in college, and Dennis Rodman was homeless at one point before he went to community college and started playing basketball. So wow, like to come back from that. I literally would have just stopped playing basketball if I thought about some of those situations, But all of them continue through on the grind and end up being NBA champions. Man, that's crazy.
Those are fantastic honorable mentions. I think across the board, I completely agree. My first one, right, is J.K. Rowling, who is the author of Harry Potter. So I think most of us listening have either read or watched her books. And so I think the thing a lot of people might not know is that she was a single mother on welfare before that and wrote most of the books and ideas for starting on a napkin at a bar and really just found a way to kind of grow out of that. She was actually rejected by all 12 of the first publishers she went to.
Mm-hmm.
So I think her story of, being resilient, of finding a way to continue to move forward and really focusing on her goal, I think is really, really, inspiring.
Well, took the words out of my mouth. That was my first one as well. Also just wanted to mention, divorced, could barely feed her child in 1994, 6 years before her first book came out, couldn't afford a computer, couldn't afford, the typewriter. So, it just goes to show you, man, just doing what you have to do to get your dreams out there is what it is, that's what it has to take sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree. So my second one is Kurt Warner.
Okay.
Kurt Warner was a quarterback in the NFL, Super Bowl champion, is now on a network announcing, football on Sundays and is a commentator in a very successful life. What a lot of people don't know is that before he was with the Rams and having the success he was actually bagging groceries at the local grocery store because his career didn't pan out after college. And so I think his ability to focus on, his personal growth and his growth on the field and then come back and, win a Super Bowl, I think is really, really inspiring.
Awesome. Also my number two. So usually when we do these lists, but I guess we are playing history right now. But Kurt Warner was also my number two, from Northern Iowa College to arena football to NFL to the Super Bowl MVP and now actually a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
And all that came from being an undrafted quarterback, man. That's crazy story. So look, I'm going to go with my number three first.
Yep.
Before you still be another one. But I don't think you'll have this one. So my third one is producer and actor Tyler Perry. Going from abused as a child, kicked out of high school, was homeless at one point. Took odd jobs here and there to pay for his first stage plays that he wanted to produce. And the first one was a failure, like complete failure. Like they were off the scene, and that first weekend only like 30 people showed up. And honestly, he kept doing more and more, saving up for more and more. Didn't break through until his seventh one, which was 6 years later. And now he has his own TV production studios, has his own movies, and literally, I mean, not just a studio. He has a studio that's bigger than Disney, Warner Brothers, Paramount, and Sony combined.
Yeah, that's an
I mean,
empire.
crazy.
Tyler Perry has an empire for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I didn't have him in my top 3, but he was one of my honorable mentions in case one got taken.
Good.
So that's good. So my last one is actually Jay-Z. So Jay-Z, everyone knows him now as, an icon, a producer, a mogul, an entrepreneur, all this stuff. But I think a lot of people didn't know is that when he first started, he was turned down by so many record labels and producers that he started his own, right? That's what started Rock Nation. And so I think, him realizing that I have this dream and this is what I'm going after and this is what it's going to take to get there is really cool. And that he followed through on that. And obviously now is, huge and massive and, moving really quickly towards the billionaire category, which is really impressive.
Absolutely, man. And everybody loves an underdog story. You know what I mean? I mean, it is great to see that the people that are all the way at the top right now had to face some small adversity or some type of adversity that they had to push through, and it ultimately made them stronger in the long haul. So when we go through adversity ourselves as small business owners and just regular people out here in the world, we shouldn't feel like it's just on us. We shouldn't feel like we're the only ones getting picked on at the moment. Everybody kind of goes through it in life.
Yeah, that's the takeaway that I hope people take from this episode, whether it's from the conversation with Brian Cooper, with Bobby, or with some of the things we just mentioned, is that, really at the end of the day, what we're hoping you get from this is you're not alone in this, right? Everyone is facing adversity. Everyone is facing difficulties, and building resiliency is about, empowering yourself, but also, like I said, finding that community that can support you through it. So I think that's great. Speaking of community, we actually have another Q&A section this week. So thank you to the people that wrote in. We had a couple to choose from and ended up choosing this question. So after last week's episode, I took a look at my business and realized we make similar mistakes over and over. Any tips to help prevent this? So for those that maybe didn't listen last week, our episode was on mistakes. We had Jared Cahalo on to talk about, mentality and how to overcome that. So I think to go to this question, I'll go ahead and take a stab first, Alex, and then
go ahead.
I'll kick it over to you. So when I think about, a business that's making the same mistakes over and over and over again, I think that's really common, right? I think that's common in our own lives. I think that's common in our own families and our own practices. But really, when we see that with clients, what we focus on is understanding, documenting, and evaluating, right? So really, what do I mean by that? So what is causing the mistake? You need to figure out what is causing the mistake. If it's, we're consistently undercharging someone for something, well, then let's go look at how we build out our pricing structure for a product. If it's we're consistently late on delivering something, well, do we need to change our promise date because of our production, time or speed? If it's our product consistently isn't up to quality, well, then we can work on quality standards that may raise the cost or may raise, may increase the time that it takes to get a product done. But if it's correct, I think there's a lot of value there. In your personal life, right? I think when you look at your business, if you're making the same mistakes personally, right, being late to work, maybe missing something, I think you need to come up with a checklist. And I know that always works for us and works for our clients as far as, what are the steps to get to this point? So for me, I think practically, it's really understanding the cause, coming up with a checklist, either daily, weekly, or monthly, that makes sure you cover those items, and then having some sort of dashboard, having some sort of KPI that you can understand how often these mistakes continue to occur, so that you can not only predict when they're going to occur, but also try and see if your efforts to minimize them are actually working. What do you think, Alex?
Absolutely. As being management consultants, I guess we have the same amount of mind thinking of like when it comes to a problem like this or a question that someone's being asked like this from one of our clients. And I was thinking just the same process. Should probably take just an overall look at the process. It may be a kink in the supply chain as you're going through the procedures that lead you to the same result each and every time. So you have to dig down and just find that root cause. And then that's the main thing that we want to drive our customers to find that root cause, find out what step in the procedure is leading you to making a reoccurring mistake. And then you can assess from there, whether it be choosing to, adjust the process overall or adjusting just that one kink in the process or that supply chain and making sure that it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, I think those are good answers. And I hope our listeners that, sent that question in, or, maybe that didn't send the question in, but are having the same thing, really think about, those tips. And it's something that really just takes, frankly, takes time and effort to figure out. And then you can kind of come up with a plan going forward. So thank you guys for tuning in today. I think we covered a lot. I think, the conversation with Brian Cooper was great. The content regarding resiliency, and hopefully you can apply that to your own life. So, as always, take time to breathe and focus on your current situation. Adversity breeds ingenuity. And Alex?
Wise counsel leads to sustainable results.